Hello Dabblers of the Internet, JP here with another Kings of War Battle Report. This is 2,300 point mini tournament, and so this is the first game from that little mini tournament that we had up in Ringwood. So this is a regular kind of thing that we have in Victoria, and it means we can try out some new lists. So if you're interested in watching the first round of a game where I'm going against some ogres, then watch on. If this is your first time to the channel, then hello. But this is a weird kind of channel because it's not only my stuff, which is Kings of War and wargaming in general, but also my wife's stuff, which is more focused, obviously, on her stitching. So as long as you don't mind those two different things in your feed, then subscribe. The forces of the Abyss army that I took to this event was taking some ideas from my recent bout in the Clash of Kings, so I got to use that list a lot. But also then bringing in some of the stuff that I used to like to use, such as the Flame Bearers. I really did like using those in the army, so I've kind of brought together two different playstyles in something that fits into the 2,300 point cap that we have for this event, which is good because there's a lot to fit in. So to start off with, I have the meat shield, and that's a lower Abyssal's horde and an Abyssal Ghoul's horde. While sometimes I think ideally I would like two hordes of Abyssal Ghouls, I actually don't mind the lower Abyssal's horde, even though you do have to pay a little bit more, 40 points more, for that increased melee stat, really, and one decreased nerve. So ultimate and regen, yeah, that's where it is. It's the regen. So the fact that the lower Abyssals have regen and the Abyssal Ghouls do not means that using the lower Abyssals as a battery for Zazuzu, which you'll see down the bottom, is I guess much better than the Abyssal Ghouls, because the Abyssal Ghouls, when they take that damage from Zazuzu as he whips out those lightning bolts, they can't get it back very easily at all. You can kind of through maybe a Drain Lives or the Cronius and stuff like that, but really wrenching damage out of the Abyssal Ghouls is not great, because then they'll end up so much damage by the time they hit the enemy, which is usually what happens. Usually they hit the enemy and they've already got like 10 damage on them and they start to die. So hence, I thought, why not? I do need an extra anvil. Let's go for the lower Abyssals. The lower Abyssals defensively are about the same as the Abyssal Ghouls, because they got the regen, but they're both defense 4, and the Abyssal Ghouls actually have higher nerve. They both have fury though, so ultimately it all comes out about the same. But the fact is that the lower Abyssals can weather some of the betrayal damage from Zazuzu the Betrayer. And so that was the idea of, yeah, they might not be so bad. And I built this whole unit for the formation, and there's nothing worse than building a unit and then going, oh, I don't like it. I don't like it in the formation, but I do like it here. The formation is just something I've still tried using it, because you guys have been suggesting ways to use it, and indeed the Despoiler Champion does offer a lot of benefits. But the problem is it's asking you to take those lower Abyssals and a horde and a regiment. I just can't really get to work. It feels like I'm just paying too much extra points for the Life Leech aura, which really is the only thing you gain out of the whole thing, is a little nifty Life Leech aura. And right now I don't have Succubi and stuff that can really take advantage of that Life Leech aura, because it's restricted to infantry, of course. So I've talked a lot, but that's why I have a horde of lower Abyssals and a horde of Abyssal Ghouls. Then I have 2 troops of Gargoyles to act as my chaff, and then I have 2 regiments of Flame Bearers. And everyone really knows about Flame Bearers, but if you didn't, why are they good? Well, they just have piercing 1 shots. They hit on 4s, they shoot 18 inches, so they're outshot by Gladestalkers, but they still do pretty good in terms of outshooting things with Fireball and the 12-inch shooting. So they're pretty cool. But you usually have to take them at least 2 of them, because they have 10 shots each. 10 shots, if you do the math, against, say, something with defense 5, will roughly net you about 2 to 3 damage. 2 to 3 damage is not nearly enough to waver any kind of respectable regiment or horde. And if you consider the turns of the game, you'd have to have your Flame Bearers, the single regiment, going nuts for the entire game without being hit, without being killed. Before they might bring something down. So you need 2 Flame Bearer regiments at least to really start putting damage on, because then that's about 5 to 6 damage on something that's defense 5. And if you do 5 to 6 damage just across 2 turns, you're usually in the realm of getting them wavered or routing the enemy. So that's why 2 Flame Bearers. But of course I have other shooting that can add on to this as well, because that is the way with the Forces of the Abyss. But when it gets into my hammers, I have brought 3
hammer units. I have what probably the I guess the hardest hitting hammers, without upgrades of course, and that are the Molochs. So the Molochs, they're fantastic. They're kind of, your demonic trolls. And so a horde of them these have 18 attacks, because it seems that all my hordes all my hammers in Force of the Abyss have 18 attacks. But they have Crushing 2, and they come with Vicious if you get the Despoiler Champion upgrade. So it's an upgrade that they can get themselves, which gives them Brutal and Vicious, which, yeah, is fantastic, because if you've got Crushing 2, most of the time you're wounding on 3s or 2s, and so re-rolling those 1s is just free re-rolls. But then they do have Defense 4, which makes them a little bit fragile, just a little. Much like the Tortured Souls, which are my other hammer. They're a bit more fragile, but they fly. But they hit on 4s, hence they need Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding, because that hitting on 4s cannot possibly go to hitting on 5s. If it goes to hitting on 5s, these guys will suddenly just do nothing. Because 18 attacks hitting on 5s is not nearly enough, even if you've got the Crushing Thunder underneath. And you lose that Thunder, chances are, if you are hitting on 5s, right? But then my final hammer is the Abyssal Horseman, but this time I'm trying to save a little bit of cash by getting them the Blessing of the Gods rather than the Brew of Sharpness. It's small, but what that means is that I've got the Despoiler Champion upgrade, or I've got, spells from my Abyssal Warlock, because you see, I haven't taken many upgrades in this list. It's really these 3 hammer units, I've got the upgrades, and then my Abyssal Warlock. Because then we move down, we've got the Cronius. I've said a lot about him. I could say it again. He hits on 3s. D6 plus 6 attacks, he's actually really good in combat. The only thing is I have a chronic ability in which I can't seem to roll his hits. Any opponent that I've gone against will attest to the fact that I just choke whenever it comes to the Cronius. So I think in these games I do relatively well, but it seems in the casual games where I'm just like, oh, we're going to send in the Cronius, and then he just does nothing. D6 plus 6 attacks hitting on 3s. You'd think you'd get something out of that, but half the time I'm doing just like barely 3 damage, which is good because that helps with his basic ability, which is Temporal Ruptures, which allows him to drain, with his damage, he drains the life, and so to speak, and bestows 3 wounds back on, or gets rid of 3 damage on one of your own units. So it's cool, up to 3. So at least you want to do 3 damage with him, so you can get that, that healing going. But he is Crushing 3, so he should be doing way more damage than that, but I am pretty bad with him. So I'm starting to learn that I can't send him in to do anything by himself. He always has to go in with something and just be bonus damage rather than all the damage. So yeah, I talked enough about that. But yeah, just as a warning, if you ever see me choking on the Cronius, that's why. You won't have seen the rolls in this slideshow version, but that's why. And now I have the Abyssal Warlock, and I'm fitting out the Abyssal Warlock with something I've never done before, and that is with Drain Life, rather than what I usually put on him, which is Bane Chant. Because I don't feel like I need an extra Bane Chant. Zazuzu comes with Bane Chant already, and he has this fantastic Lightning Bolt. An extra Bane Chant, yeah, I guess I could help out the the hordes that I've got, perhaps, or if I have to help the Tortured Souls or something, but really, I want to try out Drain Life. This all came from one game where I started using Drain Life, and I started figuring out how to use it, because there's that moment when you're using a new spell and you're just like, how do I, especially Drain Life, because unlike in the fantastic Empire of Dust or the Twilight Kin, the Abyssals get boring normal Drain Life, which means I have to get to 6 inches away from my enemy to start doing something with it. And so it took me a while to figure out how to do that with my Abyssal Warlock, because the way I like to put my Abyssal Warlock is behind, my units, behind the Horde. He's got that height 3, so he can just, he can shoot across them. Yeah, there'll be some cover sometimes, but he can shoot at the big things. He can cast his Bane Chant. He can generally be quite safe. But the problem with Drain Life is the only time that you can really start using it is when the combat is happening, right? There's no pre-combat, there's no taking off things on the side. So yeah, what I've started to learn to do with this Abyssal Warlock, especially now I have the redundancy and having also Zazuzu acting as the second Warlock, is that this Drain Life guy can get into situations where he will be able to use it more often. Obviously you don't want to just send him out in the front to get killed, but just on the side. And yeah, you give the Conjurer stuff, because why wouldn't you? The Conjurer stuff's amazing, just a reroll. So yeah, Drain Life on my Abyssal Warlock is something new to this list, definitely. Something else that's new is the Well of Souls. So I haven't used that yet. And the Well of Souls didn't really fit into the lists I was running before because it needs a lot of high value units to get its value back. So what is the Well of Souls, you might ask? You might not be familiar with it. Well, it's a well. It's supposed to be this cloud of souls kind of thing. What I actually use is the Lady Olinda miniature from Age of Sigmar. So that's part of the Nighthaunt range. I've taken her and I've painted her up spoopy, as she normally is anyway. But that is my Will of Souls. And so it's got 10 attacks. It has melee 4, so it's not the best in melee crushing 2. Life leech 5. Life leech 5 is pretty cool, right? Get your damage back. But why does it need life leech 5? Well, that's because it has the soul drain ability, where it takes damage off nearby units and puts it on itself. You do that when you give it an order, so you tell it to move, halt, charge, whatever. So you give it an order and you have to do it, and then it does its order. And so you can take up as many damage as you want beyond it's dash 20, so you can't take beyond 20 which makes sense. It can't exceed that. But it doesn't take a nerve test. So the idea is it's draining life of things, but it's 290 points. It's expensive. You're paying a lot for this privilege of just being able to suck off wounds. So you want to be able to do it on things that are worth it. And I do not consider lower abyssals and abyssal ghouls worth it. I have tried using it with other things like archfiends, and it's kind of worked, but what I'm hoping to do here is just use it to protect the things like the Molochs and the Abyssal Horsemen, and to a lesser extent the Tortured Souls, because I don't mind so much the Tortured Souls getting hit so much. But those are the things that I want to protect. And you have to play it in a correct order, is that you give orders to the things with regeneration first, and then see how well their regeneration goes, and then whatever remains, the Well of Souls can suck off those wounds. So it's actually a really good kind of synergy in that you can just heal a bit and then heal some more, heal a bit, heal some more. So that's why the Will of Souls is in here, and I really like it as well, because it's got flying, speed 8, so it still keeps the opponent guessing. And then finally we have Zazuzu the Betrayer. And so I have used him a lot before. I've talked about him in previous battle reports. He didn't make a showing when it came to the Clash of Kings, but he's back again, and Zazuzu is the awesome named wizard, Abyssal Warlock version in the Force of the Abyss, and he has Lightning Bolt and Bane Chant, but what he can do and makes him amazing is that he can really crank up those spells by inflicting damage on nearby elected unit. And it's the amount of damage is equal to how many successes you get. And you could do up to +4 on either of your spells, so it can be a Lightning Bolt 8. But that means if you roll hot with your Lightning Bolt, boy, do you hurt your... I think so far the best I've done is roll 7 successful hits with a Lightning Bolt. That the lower abyssals did not look kindly upon me for that. But 7 Lightning Bolt hits, that's pretty awesome. You just got to hope that you get the wounding from it as well. Otherwise, it's all wasted wounds. But this is the list. I have the front screen of lower abyssals and abyssal ghouls, so all these, lowly demons. I have flame bearers shooting. I have Molochs and Tortured Souls and Abyssal Horsemen all waiting to get in there, supported by the Cronius Abyssal Warlock, Well of Souls, and Zazuzu the Betrayer. And of course, the gargoyles are just, flapping about. But you can see that there's quite a lot of shooting potential in this, because yes, I have the 20 Flamebearer shots, but there's also 5 Firebolt shots from the Abyssal Warlock, so it's actually 25 so-called Flamebearer shots, thanks to the Abyssal Warlock, and then 8 Lightning Bolt. So you put that all together, it's a lot of piercing shots. It's up to, if we do some math, 33 piercing shots that can be focused, and that's the trick. And then I've also got the Drain Life if I need to whip it out later. It's Drain Life 8, so that's also pretty good. No, Drain Life 6. Drain Life 6, apologies. So that was my list. Now, what about Brenton's Ogres? So as I mentioned before, Brenton is new to Kings of War in general. And I think he's played a few games against Michael, who lent him this army. But overall, this was his first tournament game. And so he was given this army, which I think is definitely powerful, because, if there's anything powerful that can be just pushed across, it's Ogres. Because all of the units are very solid, and they're quite forgiving in the way they work. But this was his first game, and so we was just making sure that all the rules were clear, and I was talking about my different stuff. And so, yeah, we have here Siegebreaker Horde, 2 of them, which are pretty good. they got defense 6. There's not much more that's wrong with them, and they have crushing too. So there's really no downside to the siege breakers beyond the fact that maybe you wish they were nimble or something, but thankfully they're not. But then we also have a Boomer's Horde, which are great shooting, rather short range, of course, but when they do get in range, those 18 shots, they really hurt. So these are, they're supposed to be ogres lugging cannons around, so they just blast things with their handheld cannons. Then we have an Ogre Chariot's Regiment with a Brew of Sharpness. That's also a real hammer, but a bit faster. So it's probably one of the faster things in this list, because there's not that many fast things in this list. But we've got an Ogre Chariot's Regiment, and you'll see the model for that is really cool. And then we have a Giant, just a cool Giant. Nothing wrong with a Giant. He has his D6 plus 8 attacks, and he has Slayer. And obviously, I have quite a few things that Slayer will work on. More's the pity for me. And so it's just a solid model. You'll see the model. Then we have Red Goblin Sniffs. They're obviously good chaff. We have 2 Regiment of Warriors. They themselves can act as chaff, but also they're pretty tough, because they're still ogres. Then we have 2 Blasters. And, these are mind. They just mess with your mind, because you're just like, oh, don't you want to hit them first? But sometimes it's not worth going after them because they're rather small. They're usually pretty well protected. They just you keep them until you want to send them out to cause maximum damage. Maybe, because they're one of these units that relies on the blast. They hit in combat, they do blast. But maybe they'll do nothing. You can roll really low on that blast, and you can roll really high. So they can do anything from 2 damage to 18 damage if you roll really well. And it's very likely to go either way. So yeah, 2 of those blasters to keep me guessing. And then into the support, we have the Warlord on Chariot with the Blade of Slashing, and so that's just also very solid, source of inspiring, and he can just crash into things with his. He's very tough. I definitely underestimated him in this game. Then we have 2 Warlocks, and you can see with all the ogres around, their lightning bolt is going to be really boosted, because that is their ability. They get an improved lightning bolt. I think +1 for each horde. Is it horde and regiment of? I'm not very familiar with the ogres, but they get +1 to their lightning bolt to a maximum. But I think it can get up to lightning bolt 8 if that is correct. +3, I just checked. So it's up to a +3. So they can get lightning bolt 6 if they got enough of the ogres nearby. And then 2 Berserker Bullies, which really surprised me with the amount of attacks they have and how much damage they can do. Little guys, a lot of hurt. So the Berserker Bully is just a ogre character. And like all ogre characters here, so the Warlocks and Berserker Bully included, they have unit strength. They're actually large infantry. So there's a lot of unit strength here. Even though it looks like there's quite a lot of characters, there's a lot. And so that kind of doesn't bode well for what will be the scenario, which I will talk about after showing off some pictures. So you guys actually mentioned that you wanted to see some pictures of the armies. Why not take pictures of the armies? And that's a fair question, especially since I get to play a lot of really cool armies that just look amazing, and I just don't usually take the time to really take nice pictures of them. Obviously, we have all the pictures in the battle reports, but we want to be able to see them, and so this is actually Michael's army that was lent to Brenton, but that doesn't detract from the fact that it's a very cool army. So the story goes that Mike, he tends to like to acquire large collections of models, either painted already or on their way, and then he'll either himself get them up to scratch, base them, or in this case it kind of came the way it was, with only a few touch-ups required. And as you can see from this picture, this is a nautical themed, pirate themed ogre army, all based on everything's on some kind of boat and floating, or in the case of the giant, wading. So you can see here, this is one of the Warlocks, just a wonderful lass on a bit of some floating planks, and we have these guys. This is an ogre regiment sitting on a boat, looking pretty cool. And there's all of them have green stuffed everything essentially. I mean, you can see that they've got hats, the hairstyles, the clothing, all green stuffed. These boats were scratch built. You got pants. Anything you see that's not in a normal ogre, you can be sure it's green stuff. And I'm not sure of the name of the person who does these amazing projects and puts them together, but that's kind of what he does apparently. Is he puts these things together and then eventually he sells them. But he makes them very characterful, and just the time and effort required to put in to make all these green stuff sculpts and make it look good. Like, I can make terrible green stuff, but to make good looking green stuff that really looks like what it should, that's a separate talent. So this guy, he's not actually facing backwards, but Brenton was joking that he's moonwalking, but he's just turned the other way because of all the bits of the ships that are stopping him from walking forward, because he has this club. So that's the giant there. You get to see him when he turns around again later. And then here, these are siege breakers, the two siege breakers. Oh, no, that's boomers, as you can see, with the cannons on a ship. Why use the cannons in the ship when you can stand on the ship holding the cannons? So that's a boomer horde. And these are the siege breakers. There we go. So this is a siege breaker horde. There you can see a blaster, which is just really fun. It's like a kind of a gunpowder filled chest with goblins pointing on it, and it's obviously being dragged by something underwater, probably some shark or something. It's just everywhere you look, there's always just fun stuff to see. And then over here, just the same better view, and you can see behind some of the other stuff. And here's the other blaster. And then over here, this is the chariot regiment. It's just a dude riding a giant crab. We're not sure if it's actually a real crab that's just been, some kind of embalming procedure, and if eventually it'll just degrade and we'll have to get a new one. But it looks very lifelike. It's really cool, and you just can't fault it. It's just so cool. And then on this other side, you can see the other ogre regiment. Look, an accordion. The guy's holding an accordion. I didn't even know that. Whole time he was just playing music. And then the other warlock over here, and you can see this other blaster also being pulled by something underwater. It's just really cool. Back here you can see there, this is also awesome. This is the ogre warlord on chariot, and his chariot is actually a giant crocodile or alligator. I'm not quite sure, but it's awesome. It's so cool, and it's it's in the purple and the yellow, and it's all piratical. And over here's oh wait, I was completely wrong. That's the warlock, and then I was indicating as warlocks with the choppers are actually the berserker bullies. So I got that completely wrong, but it's okay. It'll make sense next. I wanted to show some pictures of my army too, so I just taken some kind of broad shots so you can see these are my Molochs. I took a picture of these in particular because they don't really look like Molochs. They're the dragon ogres, of course, but 3 of them fit perfectly onto a Moloch horde base. And then over here, that's the Well of Souls that I have constructed. So that's the Lady Alinda, but to make it a bit more epic, because otherwise she just comes on a standard base. So I made exploding kind of rock using just bits of wood that I just kept breaking and breaking and breaking, and then tried to do a bit of OSL around her to make it look like she's glowing from this bright pit from which she emerges, and then I guess she keeps floating. Anyway, so that's my Well of Souls. Then down here, all my other units. So you can see there's the lower abyssals, the abyssal ghouls in red. So they're actually just scarecrow models that have just been washed with I think it's the Flesh Terror's red contrast paint. So it does a good job, very easy. And then brown loincloths and things like that. This here is the new addition to my army. Like, actually, it's brand new. Abyssal Warlock that I just bought, painted up, and started using in time for this event. Really cool model. It's the resin's really easy to work with, putting it all together, and it has at first when I first saw it, I thought it looked dumb. I'm just like, oh, it's riding this fat demon and it looks silly. But then, I don't know how I saw it, I think I just saw it in someone else's battle report that he has this cloak going down the back. And I thought, whoa, it's a giant cloak. So you can imagine when this little demon gets off, he's trailing this cloak like some ridiculous wedding gown everywhere. And so I just thought, well, that's silly and awesome. So then that encouraged me to get it, and then I got it, and now I really like the fat dude underneath that's holding up. He's like a overweight Moloch. He's not the buff Molochs that are allowed to go along and fight in regiments and hordes. He's the overweight Moloch that is now holding a warlock. So I'm really pleased with this model. I'm happy how he painted it up, and he's getting used as a standard warlock in this game, whereas my previous one, the converted warlock, is Zazuzu, because he's got the character to be Zazuzu, whereas this can be a standard warlock who has the Drain Life and Conjurer staff. So the scenario is Dominate, and that's pretty simple, right? Here it is. Get into this ring by the end of the game and have more unit strength than your opponent. Very simple game type, good one to start off with. We're all here, the coffee's just kind of kicking in, so I think this is a good one to start off with. But unfortunately, this is not a good army to face off against in it. Because Ogres love dominate. They got the unit strength on the smaller bases to just get in there and be really hard to shift, especially when you're talking siege breakers. And so what do we have arrayed against the against this dominate area? Well, we have one siege breaker horde there and one siege breaker horde there. So all they need to do is just head on forwards and sit in there. And they're speed 6, so they're going to get there a whole lot faster than I am. So yeah, let's go through the deployment, showing what we've got over here. So we've kind of got an idea from my gawping at the miniatures, but we've got a Berserker Bully, not a Warlock. So Berserker Bully, Regiment Giant, Warriors Regiment Giant, should have actually enunciated. Then we have Horde of Boomers, Horde of Siege Breakers with a Warlock behind, Blaster in between those two Siege Breakers, because here's the other Siege Breakers, and behind that Siege Breaker is, I think there's the Warlord. You can't quite see him, but there he is, Warlord on Chariot. Other Warlock. Then we have the Chariot Regiment, the Giant Crab, which you can see right here, looking awesome. And then the other Blaster, the other Warrior Regiment, and then the final Berserker Bully. So they're all just spread right out to envelop my army. And so, the game plan really is get the Siege Breakers in there and then use everything else to keep the Siege Breakers alive. And just let the Siege Breakers kill all my stuff. So looking at this, I need to get my unit strength into that area as well. So that's what I arrayed against it. I have here, in the front, I have Flame Bearer Regiment, shooty shooty. I then have the Abyssal Ghouls. There's Zazuzu there, so that's my original Warlock. Then I have the Lower Abyssals Horde, and then I have the other Flame Bearers. So that's the first rank, and I really need to get these units in. The fact is that they actually have the unit strength, but they're also my meat shield. So I want them to take the hits, but I don't want them to die. But, you can't have both. But then, coming up in the second rank, we have the Tortured Souls. We have the Cronius, the Abyssal Horsemen, Well of Souls, and then the Molochs. And, of course, here is that Warlock. And then the two Gargoyles, one's behind this house, and the other one is out over here just to mess around, I think. Really, what I should have done is kept these gargoyles much, much closer, because I am spreading out too early with these gargoyles, because the gargoyles don't need to be deployed out there, because they've already got the ability to go anywhere they like. If they want to go 20 inches from here to here and pivot the way they need to, they can do that. No worries. So I'm not quite sure why I was deploying out that way. But, these are my thoughts straight away. And so, yeah, this is going to be a difficult battle. Especially as what I didn't realize, I deployed, and then I think it was only when I was starting to move my stuff that I really actually started to think about the terrain, and I noticed this. What is this? Turns out, what else can it be but probably blocking terrain? And if you define blocking terrain by literally the footprint, then I have deployed a horde of lower abyssals not right behind, but it's enough that I'm going to have to shuffle sideways to get out of this situation. Because, yeah, if that's the footprint, that's blocking terrain. Because what do we have on this board? I didn't go through that. That's a faux pas on me. We have here, flat terrain, it's a crater. A hill, kind of ruins that are a hill. Then we have a forest over here, and then another crater, some more flat terrain. Then we have this blocking terrain, this little tiny mausoleum thing, so that's not really going to be doing much. Then we have another flat terrain crater, another flat terrain crater, this thing that I didn't even think existed until I finished deployment and said, yeah, let's go. And then I look at it and go, oh no. So I deployed right behind it. Fantastic. Good work, JP. You've wasted your first turn by having to just reshuffle your army just a little bit sideways. And then, of course, this is blocking terrain. So it's not quite the 2-2-2-2 mix of, two hills, do this, to that. So I think we're running a bit low on terrain. But that's okay. I like different combinations anyway, so I'm not going to poo-poo this. I am happy, but I'm not happy with this, because I should have pointed to it and been like, what terrain is this? What are we going to decide on this? And obviously Brenton's, he's new to this. He's not going to be like, aha, that's blocking terrain right there. You sure you want to deploy that? We're just having fun. And my fun turned out not so fun because I made stupid deployment decisions. So yeah, it turns out I've got myself in a tricky situation and really can't deploy this entire line between these two spots unless I got that Warlock a bit further back, the Zazuzu. So yeah, that's the fun stuff there. Turn 1 to the Ogres. Brenton gets the first turn. And he moves everything up. It all just goes forward, with the exception of anything that getting stuck in difficult terrain, it can't go at the double. But he was keen, moving everything at the double if it could. You see here, moved up. Over here, moved up. The only thing I didn't quite show, Fleabag Sniffs. They didn't move up, they moved up just enough, and then popped off some cover shots at my gargoyles, and killed them. It was only 2 damage, but I mean, any damage on a gargoyles is putting them in the danger zone, to be sure, because, you know, when you're 8-10, you're not far away from losing. But, you know, considering I had Inspiring nearby, my Warlocks weren't far away, I was shocked. So I did not do very well at looking after them, and that's why I was thinking, well, what if I actually had them not there and instead somewhere else, such as behind my army, well out of the way of these sniffs. But these sniffs have already made their points back, bastards. So yeah, good play on Brenton there. And then here we just have the lightning bolts from some of the warlocks flying in, and got my flame bearers wavering. So that's cool too. Why not? I don't want to have 10 shots there. I don't need them. Don't need them. And this is just the angled shot to remind me from whence that lightning bolt came. There it is, that bastard. So yeah, what a start. It's turn 1 for me. I gotta regroup and reposition my army, and that's kind of what I do. Everything's just gonna move a little bit. These guys pivoted sideways. I have shuffled just ever so slightly to the left. Everything, and yeah, we're just getting ready to actually get into our game that we have. I've already taken the wounds off the flame bearers, so what I did, I repositioned them, turned them a bit, and then what I have done is regened, got one back, and then took the rest onto the Well of Souls, because I don't want damage on these guys. You know, 3 damage now becomes, you know, 6 damage, and then they're gone. So they don't last very long, especially, you know, they're such low defense. Yeah, and so since they're wavered, I had to move the Molochs sideways just to get them out of the way, because I was realizing they're going to hold up these Molochs and prevent me from actually acting as a threat on things. But the problem is that I'm moving these Molochs out of range of inspiring stuff like that. And not that that's going to really impact anything so early on, but it's just showing that my Molochs are starting to get out of the battle group that is my castle here, and so that's not optimal play for sure. Over here, I've just put the gargoyles aside just to make him think a bit. I don't think anything here can shoot them, and so they're hopefully just going to be there and just be like, hey, you don't really want a rear from gargoyles. Not that a rear from gargoyles isn't going to kill you, but it's going to be a lot of damage that you don't need, and no one wants to turn around to fight the gargoyles because you may double one it and be putting your rear to the rest of the army. So that's why I just thought I'll put them there, just see what happens. It's definitely not the best use, but it's not the worst. And then here I'm just showing a picture of not quite sure what, but you know, these Molochs look pretty snazzy, that's for sure. But I think what I have been doing is trying to make sure I am constantly out of range of that giant, because I do not want to take a charge from the giant on the Molochs, because a giant into the Molochs will get his Slayer, so he'll be doing all kinds of ridiculous amounts of damage that these guys just can't take. Over here, I managed to do some shooting with my other Flamebearer regiment that's not wavered, as well as the firebolts come in. So I'm just putting some damage onto this warrior's regiment to hopefully take it off soon. And that's just indicating the unit that did it. Good on me. Some of that damage was contributed to by Zazuzu, which is good on him, but obviously not all that much went through, because I only got 3 hits, and so chances are he only did about 1 damage. But, you know, it's okay. He's just warming up his lightning bolts. Good old Zazuzu here. Turn 2 for the Ogres. Will we see some combats? The Ogre army continues to lumber forward, or should I say float, because this armada of Ogres is steadily approaching, and it is quite terrifying, because I know the pain that will come. And the Giants and everything are just trying to get in range of things, just so that they can actually get into combat. But what I am a little bit scared of, actually, in this instance, are the Boomers, because they are starting to get into range, and they have a lot of firepower packed in those cannons. And over here, we can just see that he's definitely taken into account these gargoyles, because he didn't just start going forward with his giant. And so that's what you can see all around here. All kinds of shots start coming in to my flame bearers. We're talking the lightning bolts, we're talking the boomers, they're all getting into range, but thankfully they only do 1 damage. And why is that? Well, it's probably because those boomers have been struggling their way through a forest, so they're actually going to be hitting a lot worse. And so what that results in is, just generally sometimes you just whiff. And so these guys caught out with a lucky break, that's for sure. Now, hopefully my army will start working in turn 2, now that I've made my changes. So you can see that everything is now ready, but I'm not really moving forwards because they're coming to me, and I do like this position of the crater, and I'd rather not force the issue. At the same time, I probably should have moved forward at least a bit, but what I was seeing is if I moved forward at all, I'd start inviting multiple charges at once. Whereas if I stayed where I was, there were only singular charges that were going to be invited at all, such as from these siege breakers and from that chariot. And so that's what I was keeping in mind. Now you can see over here, I didn't take a picture of the models, but these are the Fleabag Sniffs. They're actually goblins riding sharks. So the Fleabag Sniffs have made their way around, hoping to start taking off some other things. But what I've now done is turn my Warlock with his Drain Life, who's just waiting to test it out, to meet them. And again, we have the Morlocks here, and I have just made sure to nudge them back ever so slightly so they're out of charge range of that giant. Don't want to find out what that can do. The Gargoyles have made sure to be outside the arcs of these units and just be in their flanks to continue just being annoying little shits. And over here, we've got some shooting from the Flame Bearers. It's shooting phase, and well, look at all that successful shooting. We see removal of the Fleabag Sniffs. We see removal of the Regiment of Warriors. So I'd say all round that that's been a pretty good shooting phase. Just another picture, just in case I forgot to mention it. But I didn't, because I'm very happy. Over here, the Flame Bearers on this side, so those ones that were once wavered, but are now not, proceeded to start putting some shooting into these Warriors Regiment, getting another 4 damage as well. I was hoping to take off them too, but unfortunately that was not the case. And then over here we can see that I've got some more damage onto these lower Abyssals with some lightning bolts, which was probably contributing to the other regiment being removed. Turn 3 for the Ogres. They've taken a few hits, but I think they're fine. And so the combats are on. We've got multiple charges going in, but thankfully no big multiple charges at once on the one unit. So quickly showing off this side, we can see that everything's just trying to stay out of range of the Morlocks while also itself getting into range. So it's the constant dance of will you, will I, who will go first, and no one really wants to be going first right now. Over here where the charges are happening, and so both my anvils are suitably acting as what they should be. Meat shields, taking the brunt. So the ghouls here are a bit more than they bargained for, getting not only the chariot, but also the blaster. So that blaster's going in as well. So that's how a blaster wants to be, whereas the chariot has gone over this terrain. But it's got brewer sharpness, so that will somewhat mitigate the bumpiness of going over that terrain. On the other side, we have a single horde of siege breakers, which is exactly what I wanted, and was the sole reason why the lower Abyssals did not move up. Because I just didn't want to be getting a double charge from 2 siege breakers, or another blaster or the warlord. So in this way, I could only get one charge could get in there. So that suited me just fine. On the left there, we can also see the Berserker Bully has gone into the Flame Bearers, which they are not all that happy about. But unfortunately, they couldn't kill everything with their shooting, so something has to hit them. Now we just get to zoom in on the cool clashing between Crab and Ghoul here, and the siege breakers floating in on their barge right through the lower Abyssal. And behind them arrayed are all the rest of the forces just waiting to get in. So there's still siege breakers and boomers and the warlord and another blaster and 2 warlocks there just sitting there. You can see the warlocks, they look pretty cool. Didn't get good pictures of them before. But what I'm quite pleased about is the fact that he's still thinking about these gargoyles, because they're just sitting there. I haven't really done all that much with them, but this Berserker Bully is just, trying to keep them in his line of sights, and I will just keep flapping about. So looking down over here, this is some nasty shooting going on. So these guys only had 1 wound on them, and now they've got 7. So that's the boomers finally getting off some real shots and doing some real damage. So they're wavered. So that will make 3 turns so far, where they'll only be doing 1 turn of shooting. So it's not great as far as Flame Bearers go. Over here, we start getting real damage going in, so it's 4 damage from the Berserker Bully, but I think generally the 13-15, they can handle it, whereas the ghouls have started taking on some damage, 8 damage so far. But then that jumped right up to 16 when the blaster spiked. So that was 8 damage from the chariot. I'm like, okay, cool, we're good. And then it was up to 16, but thankfully it was a wavering. That's what was rolled. And these guys are Fury, so they are fine for now. But 16 damage definitely puts them right on the edge. Over here, these guys also took a whopping 12 damage from the Siege Breakers, which is a little bit nasty because, yeah, these guys they have a lower they're 20-22 in terms of their nerf, but that still means you need 10s twice. So thankfully that did not occur. So now it's turn 3. For me, time to hit back with everything I can. Which unfortunately is not all that much because I can't get all the things in that I want to because of these two hordes taking up that much space. Perhaps having them as regiments, they die faster and I can get my meaty stuff in, but the horde multi-basing potential is just too much fun to turn down. So instead, we're stuck with them. And so what has charged in? Well, obviously we've got the counter charge from the ghouls. There's no blaster to worry about because once it deals damage, it is dead. It explodes. Hence it does such an explosive amount of damage. I counter charge also with the flame bearers. I'm not sure what I was hoping to achieve there. And I also counter charge with the lower abyssals, but along with the Well of Souls that can sneak in this gap here. So the Well of Souls are going in and hopefully add its crushing 2 to help get through that defense 6 siege breakers. Just add on some damage. I don't expect them to break it, but just help try and remove them initially. So that 1 damage there was a result of the Drain Life, which is, I guess, middling, which helped heal the Abyssal Ghouls up 1, but then the Flame Bearers did no damage themselves, so no nerve test for the Berserker Bully. Not that it really matters much, it takes quite a lot of damage to start getting rid of these guys, but unfortunately the Flame Bearer is not doing a great job in melee, but who's really that surprised? I'm certainly not. Over here, though, the Well of Souls did help a bit because even though these guys are being chanted, as you can see by this token, that really doesn't help them get through Defense 6. And so with the combined arms of 25 attacks with Bane Chant and then also the Well of Souls 10 attacks, I got 6 damage in on those Siege Breakers, which I think is pretty good. It's pretty good. But you can see the bulk of that was from the Well of Souls because she's fully healed up the 3 damage that she'd taken from the Flame Bearers in previous turns. So yeah, it's going to take a while to get through these siege breakers, but get through them I must. Now it's on to turn 4 with the Ogres. So what does Brenton do? Well, now, he's decided to make some room in the front. So the siege breakers have gone into the Well of Souls because he's correctly identified this as being a key unit for my army, and I've offered it up ready for the taking. It's going to take quite a beating though because it is -20, so it's not easy to remove. But to help finish off these lower abyssals that he's already started whacking damage on, we have the Ogre Warlord on Chariot coming through, so that's just powered on through. And we've obviously got counter charge from the Chariot into the Abyssal Ghouls, and the Berserker Bully continues abusing my Flame Bearers. And then over here we can see that the army's still kind of backed up. This blocking terrain really is kind of holding up a lot of things, because if you imagine that wasn't there, it'd be double charges galore. But right now everyone's waiting in single file to get into this combat zone. This is where everything's going on, and whereas over here everyone's just kind of standing back. The Giant's like, well, I don't want to commit, and the Moloch's like, well, I don't want to commit, and the Ogre Regiment's just kind of slowly shuffling in there. And that's what we can see here. And then, oh look, there's my gargoyles. I didn't take a picture of that, but they've just flapped around. And I think by now Brenton's just like, you know what, gargoyles, I don't care. But he does care. He makes it look like he doesn't, but what he's done is his Warlock there with his Lightning Bolt 6 is just angling to take a shot. Although I think it is now Lightning Bolt 5 because there's not that many ogres nearby. But that's his plan, is to stop trying to waste time with these units, which is smart. These guys don't need to chase down gargoyles. Lightning bolts can do it, especially since there's less and less targets for that lightning bolt here, especially targets that aren't going to be receiving the benefit of cover. In the shooting phase, zap, we've got lightning bolt right into Zazuzu, so he gets a taste of his own medicine. 2 damage, but he's okay. That wavering token is for the ghouls, not for Zazuzu. Over here we also have another lightning bolt, and that managed to put on 3 damage, and I believe that wavers them, but I haven't put the token down. And speaking of wavering, these guys take another massive blow of boomer shots, and yeah, they're just not taking that very well. Yeah, so they're wavering, and these guys now in combat, we have much more damage getting put onto the Flame Bearers. They're regenerating as much as they can, but it's just not enough, and we'll see how they go. They do survive, and then the Abyssal Ghouls take a huge amount of damage, so now onto 23, which is now hitting their limits because they are 21, 23, so they are devastated as a result of this chariot just constantly pounding into them. But Snake Eyes did save them, so hence they still have that. They shouldn't actually have that wavering token, but I think a Snake Eyes is why they stayed. Unfortunately, the lower Abyssals did not get that same amount of luck. They did receive another hefty amount of damage from that chariot, and they are gone. The Well of Souls took 9 damage, but being dash 20, there's still you need 11s twice to get rid of it, so it's perfectly fine. With its life leech 5, I think it will live on. So I've taken quite a bit of damage, but now I have my whole lines ready for turn 4 to charge. So here we have the flame bearers have just disengaged. I decided to get out of there because I've had enough of being in that combat, especially since they're really not doing that much. And so I just moved out, and even though I'm disordered, I can't shoot, but I just wanted to get out of there. But should I have done that? Probably not. Probably should have stayed in combat and just held him up for as long as I can, because I am regenerating quite a remarkable amount. And so it is feasible that it could have just continued on that way, but instead I've just disengaged. These guys, since they're still there, they can just keep hitting back, and so that's what they do. But this time, now that there's some room, that the lower abyssals have disappeared, I have now sent in the Cronius to finish off that thing there, that whole fight. So the Cronius is going to bring to bear his crushing 3 and hopefully not fill up his attacks to get rid of that chariot. Because it's only taken 2 damage thus far, which, that's what you get when you have ghouls. And then, well, whoops, I just somehow stopped taking pictures for the rest of my turn. But what I can say was that the Tortured Souls went into the Warlord. So if you remember, that Warlord was there. He came in, he took out my lower abyssal, so I charged that with the Tortured Souls, which were waiting just in behind. Why did the horsemen not go that way? Well, the horsemen decided to angle their way towards that giant because the giant coming in was concerning me greatly, and I didn't think the Molochs could do it. Why couldn't the Molochs do it? Because I decided to charge the Molochs off into that distant Berserker bully to hopefully take it out. I was identifying that as the edge of the battle. So with that all in mind, I can then safely say that none of those things worked. No enemy units were destroyed as a result of my amazing actions, so maybe taking pictures wasn't that important. In any case, we will move on with a turn 5 ogres, where you'll get to see those units where they are anyway, because nothing really changed. So all the combats continue on. We have, indeed, as I showed, we have the lower abyssals. This is the problem, we have lower abyssals and abyssal ghouls. You get them mixed up. But the abyssal ghouls continue on. They've gained some health back thanks to a drain life. So that's pretty good. And the target for my drain life has primarily been the Berserker Bully because he's lower defense. So he's a good little thing to just pull some wounds off and heal up my nearby unit. So at least they're not devastated anymore. Then over here, yeah, you can see that Tortured Souls went in. So it just helps confirm what I've done. So what has he done? Well, he's going back in with his things. We can see a picture here. That's where I went in with my Molochs, and they did do quite a lot of damage, but unfortunately the double ones kept that Berserker Bully around, and what I got in return was a flank charge, even though it's a hindered flank charge, of Regiment of Warriors. So those Ogre Warriors in my side are definitely not good for Molochs, because they can't really take 18 crushing 1 attacks. They're just not built for that. But over here we can see that the Siege Breakers are gone. So in my turn, I guess I apologize, I did not mention, but I guess some lucky roll got those Siege Breakers out of here thanks to the Well of Souls. So the Well of Souls is a real champion. So good model and good unit. So it's a confusion of pictures where I was trying to take them and catch up because I realized I wasn't taking pictures. I must have just blanked out. But you can see that the counter charges that have occurred, we've got the Warlord going into the Tortured Souls, and we've got the Chariot now countercharging my Cronius, I believe, because it has moved over a little bit. So I think that's the case over there. After a round of regeneration occurring with my Gargoyles, the Lightning Bolt a second time managed to get them again up to 3 damage, but this time did not waver them, which is actually just pure luck, I have to say. You can see here, I think it rolled a 4. So that's just what I need to now really be annoying with my Gargoyles, as I planned to the entire time. The Flame Bearer's luck is just running out, so disengaging them really didn't offer anything because now the Berserker Bully just got to chase them down and hit them some more, and so they're wavering once again, and with 9 damage on them. Ford's trouble of getting into the combat, the Cronius is now the one taking the damage, so the chariot has given up on trying to take down my Abyssal Ghouls, and is now attacking Macronius, and receives 7 damage, which is pretty good for the chariot, but it is a sharpness chariot, to be fair. This is, while I don't really want Macronius to die, I kind of actually prefer that my Abyssal Ghouls are now no longer the target, because soon there won't be anything targeting the Abyssal Ghouls, and they are one of my primary sources of unit strength in the army. So if they can survive and get into this dominate zone, I might be in for a win if I can. There's still so much in there, but it's definitely preferable, and I can see why, because it's the big nasty guy with the crushing 3. You want to take him out, but these guys were so close to death, and now they're not. Over here, the Tortured Souls do take 7 damage, but they're dash 17, so it takes quite a high, lucky double roll to get rid of them, so I think they will be fine. But guess what wasn't fine? The Molochs. That double one really killed them. They couldn't take on all this damage at once, and I thought, oh, the hindered charge from Warrior Regiment shouldn't take them out, but it did. So my Molochs really didn't do anything this game. They couldn't even take out a Berserker Bully, so not impressed with this time with the Molochs. So now it's turn 5, where I did actually take pictures. And what do these pictures contain? Well, it's a whole bunch of counter charges. We continue the fight into the chariot with both the Cronius and the lower Abyssals. They're not going to give up. I haven't taken away this wavering token for a while now, so I don't think it actually means anything whatsoever. I have my Drain Life still sitting here to try and help out these poor Flame Bearers, because they are just stuck where they are. On this side, I do have my Tortured Souls attacking the Ogre Warlord on the chariot, and I think what I've positioned is Azuzu. I was thinking Lightning Bolt, but I could also Bane Chant, because Bane Chanting these guys, the Tortured Souls, is a good idea because their Thunderous is now gone. But what I have done over here is jumped over with my nimble flying Well of Souls, who's got quite a lot of height, to attack this cheeky little Warlock here. So I just thought, I don't want to be here, because there's all kinds of things angling towards me. I don't want to take a blaster to the face, because that could spike and just kill me. So instead, what I've done is I've just flown out of the arcs of all these monster and gribblies to take out, hopefully, this Abyssal Warlock, regular Warlock, Ogre Warlock. And over here, well, the dancing has finally paid off. The Sharpness horses, sorry, not Sharpness horses, Blessing Elite horses, so the Blessing of the Gods, have gone into the Giant, because that's just, they outrange the Giant, and so I managed to finally get that charge off. And the Molochs couldn't do it, so here we are. And finally, the Gargoyles, with all their shenanigans and regen, they're on 1 wound now, have gone into the other Warlocks. So I've got both Warlocks locked down. So the first of the combats, because there's no real shooting to go on, the Elite Horses, well, they do 10 damage to the Giant. And then the Flame Bearers, well, they didn't really do any damage here, but the Drain Life certainly did, and got a whole lot of life back here. So that Drain Life's starting to really pay dividends, as well as the regen, of course. These guys, well, they and the Cronius managed to destroy the chariot and march on, and so these guys, I just moved them forward because I'm just like, get into the dominate zone, come on, I need to get there and get my unit strength in. Over here we can see I did 3 damage, just it's a top-down picture with my Well of Souls, so that's pretty good, and I did 3 damage also here, but I don't think that's really enough to get rid of them, so that's a shame, but at least we've shut down their magic potential just for a turn. So turn 6 for the Ogres, well, that's now seeing a whole lot of charges in return. So we've got the Giant that's countercharged here. Can't do all that much, thankfully, with its Slayer, because it's not cavalry aren't part of that, so that's a good matchup for me. Meanwhile, obviously, we've got countercharges with the 2 different Warlocks and to the things that are attacking them, be it the Gargoyles over in the back or the Well of Souls here in the middle. To take on these Tortured Souls, because they just haven't died yet, and they did get some of their health back thanks to their life leech, we have both the Ogre Warlord and the Blaster coming in with the hopes that I think Brenton was hoping that the Blaster would have a repeat performance of what the other Blaster did and really do some true damage. These 2 big hordes, the Horde of Boomers and the Horde of Siege Breakers, are just kind of circling around because they just couldn't quite get angles on anything they really wanted. So they've just pivoted a bit and you can see that these boomers are really having a tough time with this blocking terrain right here. And so yeah, it's really thrown on both of us off, that's for sure. And then coming up, just kind of as an afterthought, I mean, they've already done a good job because they've both made their points back by taking out the Moloch Horde, but now they're just trying to come and be relevant again. So largely on this side of the fights, I was actually quite lucky, because what actually happened was, unfortunately for the Ogres, this is where things kind of fell apart a bit. So these tortured souls were probably destined to die if things went really well, but unfortunately the blaster really whiffed and did pretty much nothing, and then the Warlord also didn't do great, so that ultimately the damage inflicted upon my tortured souls was negligible, which had already been healed up thanks to the Cronius' efforts and their own life leech, so they didn't actually have that much damage on them at that point, and they were fine because they are fearless anyway. And also here, the 4 damage on the Horsemen, also fine. Horsemen at 4 damage are quite solid. 7 damage, well, that's a different story. But what we can't see quite off screen here is that the Flame Bearers did perish. The Berserker Bully, over the course of 3 turns, managed to hack his way through every single Flame Bearer, and so they are gone. So now, we've got these units here that are all inside that radius, but all these ones are hoping to get there. And that radius being the dominate radius, which I think is what's marked out by that little token there. So it's now my turn to get these forces all in line and get them into that dominate zone. And so that's exactly what I said about doing. The Cronius goes into the flank. I mean, I wanted to do that anyway, because that'll help the Cronius actually do the damage you need to do to the flank of the Ogre Warlord, but that brings him into that 12-inch range. I also charge in with my Abyssal Ghouls, because even though they won't do anything being a hinted charge, they get to move that whole distance, and now suddenly they're inside that, bringing their 3-unit strength to bear. I then shuffle all my Warlocks to be just inside this range, while also being able to do what I need them to do. The only thing that's not in there enough are the Tortured Souls right now, but I plan to change that. If we can, we need to kill this Warlord. The Horsemen aren't really contributing all that much. They, I think, are a bit too far, but they do need to kill a giant, and so kill a giant they will try. So onto this side, well, I get lucky with this little guy with his drain life, and I managed to drain life and kill that Berserker Bully and get some of that health back onto the Tortured Souls if I need it, just in case for that next turn. Then over here, I am successful in killing the Ogre Warlord. So what do? Well, I move this guy sideways, the Cronius sideways D3, to make way so that these guys can move forward D6, and that all gets them within 12 of the token right there. And so now I have quite a lot of unit strength inside that radius. On this side, the Horsemen managed to take out the Giant, which is great for attrition, and also good for the ego and proving that the Abyssal Horsemen are my favourite of all the hammers. And so then it's here that it ends. You can see that we have the unit strength of all these different units being the 2 hordes, the Horde of Siegebreakers, the Horde of Boomers, and then that 1 Warlock, compared to my Horde of Lower Abyssals, the Horde of Tortured Souls, we've got Cronius, we've got Well of Souls, and we got Zazuzu, and I don't think actually this Abyssal Warlock was in there, but that's already enough unit strength to outweigh the unit strength that he had there. And so a victory was gained at the very last moment. And that's a pretty good start to this little one-day tournament. I like these little one-day tournaments. They're always good fun, and it's a way to try and test out these new lists in a bit more of a less committal kind of way. But there are always lessons to be learned, and this time I did write them down. This is something I've learned from Page Neo and his newbie dice. So what lessons were learnt? Well, I should learn to hide the gargoyles. That's the first one, because I certainly didn't. I obviously didn't expect the sniffs to take them off so easily, but 2 damage is 2 damage, and that's quite reasonable from these guys who hit on 5s, but you only need a couple hits because their defense of the gargoyles is so low. So what I should have done is put them behind my army, not peeking out from this not very big piece of blocking terrain. I also need to clarify the terrain. I need to look at the board and go, what is all those things? Usually that's very apparent, but in the case of this little, I guess monument thing, that wasn't clear, and I should have just been like, hey, are we going to be using this as a blocking terrain that's that complete footprint? And if so, yeah, cool. I'll just not deploy so stupidly. So that's what I need to do. Definitely, that's definitely a very low-level thing that you should be doing in all your games. Now, one that's I guess it may not have changed anything, but focusing the flame bearers refers to the fact that sometimes I like to deploy these flame bearers separately when really I should be deploying them together so that they can shoot on the same things. Especially in this case, that they were separated and these guys started taking damage and getting wavered all the time because they were kind of exposed on that other flank. Perhaps it's with the way that this board was set up, I couldn't fit them on that other side together, and maybe they did better if they were on this side together, and they could have put pressure on the giant and stuff. But in general, yeah, I need to focus the flame bearers because they are much more threat when they're put together, as I described when I was talking about how many shots they can do. And finally, I need to protect the Molochs, because I didn't. I kind of let them drift out from the main army unprotected, and then I just sent them off on a silly errand by themselves without any inspiring. That's really what did it. He got a high roll, but if there was something nearby, it's much less likely that high roll would stick. But, there was no inspiring and they were out there by themselves. So I learnt these lessons, and I learnt these lessons from Brenton, the relatively new player, which goes to show how good a player he is if he can give me these lessons in some of his first games, especially his first tournament game. So he was a great opponent. It was really good fun, and I think he's got the makings for a very good Kings of War player because he was already putting me through my paces, and I've been playing this for a year now. So if he gets in some true practice and finds an army that's really his, and I think he's already made headway into getting towards his own army. Hopefully we'll see some new forces from him in the future tournaments, so-called MightCons. So yeah, that's where I'll leave it today. It was a small win for me, and it's time to move on to the next game, which I will then hopefully bring up soon. And I've got some other videos coming out too. I keep referring to, but yeah, I've got some other stuff. So hopefully you're all staying safe, and if you got anything you want to comment on, things I should have done, things I did wrong, stats I might have said wrong off the top of my head, which I often do, please let me know in the comments below, and give it a like or dislike. Either way, it helps me know what I need to do later. Otherwise, everyone stay safe and healthy. See ya!